Next tonight, it's set to be the most disruptive strike yet. Drivers and guards from both the RMT and ASLEF unions will walk out tomorrow, bringing the tube network to a standstill. It's over that ongoing row about job cuts, pensions and conditions. The unions say the cuts are a political decision. The government say the ball is in City Hall's court. Our political correspondent Simon Harris reports.
For many tourists, the underground stations at Heathrow are their first taste of real London. The sometimes shabby trains rattling up and down the Piccadilly line are a quick way into the capital. But not tomorrow. With the tube almost certainly at a standstill, the Elizabeth line will have to take the strain. We know the Elizabeth line gets very busy in the morning with air travellers and commuters coming in from Heathrow and West London. How much busier is it likely to be tomorrow?
Well, with little or no tube service expected tomorrow, other parts of the TfL network will be operating, but they will be busier than normal, naturally.
Which is why commuters who can't work from home have been warned there could be queues.
I'm going to have to stay overnight and then get a taxi home.
I'll just be able to work from home, so it doesn't really affect me that much.
I think it's terrible because I have to take bus, and that means I have to go. I need to about 3 hours.
At this riverboat bar on the Thames, there are no bookings for tomorrow. Wednesdays are usually busy. The owner says constant strikes influence her hiring policy.
Having to now think about when we recruit people, where they live, and it's become a question when during interviews as to how travel will be affected due to the rail strikes.
Tomorrow's walkout involves members of the drivers' union ASLEF and the RMT, which represents station staff. Unlike the rail strikes, this dispute is not about pay. It's about 600 jobs which are disappearing, changes to working practices for the drivers, and possible reforms to TfL's pension scheme. In 2021, the government ordered TfL to carry out a pension scheme review following a series of bailouts during COVID. The aim was to find savings of £100 million a year. TfL says it has considered options, but insists there are no final proposals. TfL says there are no proposals to change the pension scheme at the moment. Why don't you call off the strike?
To be frank, that's rather disingenuous. The agreement with the government states that by this Friday they have to agree proposals and an implementation plan.
I did warn the government that these conditions could lead to industrial action, and I'm sorry to be proved right. What the government should be doing is removing these conditions, reassuring the transport workers, the trade unions, that their pension rights won't be affected.
The government said it had given TfL £6 billion since the start of COVID, and it was up to the mayor how to spend the money. Tonight, any chance of a last-minute deal to halt the strike seemed to have passed.
Well, Simon, it's fairly busy behind you. It is after 6 o'clock already, but it'll be a very, very different picture tomorrow, won't it?
Yes, Charlene, this dispute has been going on for months, but it's the first time that ASLEF members have gone on strike, and without drivers there can be no train, so the entire tube network is likely to shut tomorrow. There won't be any trains on the Elizabeth line between Abbeywood and Paddington before 7:30 in the morning. There are likely to be very long queues at some bus stops, and to make matters worse, there will still be disruption on the underground during Thursday morning's rush hour, which just happens to be the start of the next strike by RMT members working for some mainline train companies.
Thanks very much, Simon.
Heathrow's third runway was supposed to create thousands of jobs, boost the economy and keep the airport competitive. But more than 2 years after the £16 billion project was given the go-ahead, there's still no sign of any development. It's a relief to those living nearby who oppose the runway, but Heathrow insists it's conducting a review and will decide what's next by the end of the year. Our political correspondent Simon Harris has the latest.
Heathrow have been trying to get a third runway since the late 1940s. They haven't succeeded yet, and I don't see them succeeding this time round.
Justine Bailey is one of the stalwarts of the campaign to stop Heathrow's expansion. The village of Harmondsworth has been her home for 30 years. In that time, she's learnt to live with the airport on her doorstep.
You close the double glazing. In the summer, you go out in the garden in the quieter periods, but it's always there. The trouble is with their expansion plans, they want to come a kilometre closer, which would mean putting on ear defenders when I open my front door.
It's more than 2 years since the Supreme Court gave Heathrow the green light to go ahead. The airport's official position is that the £16 billion development is under review. But backers, including businesses and unions, say the case for the third runway is as strong as ever.
It's a hub airport, it's a main hub airport, and to compete with the other hub airports in Europe, it needs to have a third runway. You know, the whole economy will benefit by that in London and the wider economy in the UK as well.
Over half of our trade now as a country by value comes through this airport. If we want to grow that, if we want to be a trading nation post-Brexit, we have to reach those new destinations. It's a great opportunity to create jobs, to create new apprenticeships as well.
Even with the third runway, the airport believes it can substantially cut carbon emissions thanks to so-called sustainable aviation fuel and the prospect of electric and hydrogen aircraft engines. It's an argument opponents don't buy.
This is not the sort of development that we need for our economy. We need a green industrial revolution, a Green New Deal where we're investing in alternative energy and we're moving people away from polluting forms of transport in this way.
For anti-third runway campaigners, the last few decades have been a rollercoaster ride of highs and lows, and it still hasn't ended.
And Simon will have more on that on tonight's edition of The Late Debate. He joins us now from Westminster. Simon.
Yes, Carolyn, on tonight's programme we'll discuss the pros and cons of a third runway with two MPs whose constituents live under the flight path, Labour's Seema Malhotra and Sarah Olney from the Lib Dems. We'll also be joined by Croydon MP and Home Office Minister Chris Philp. As well as airport expansion, we'll be talking about yesterday's budget and the ongoing tube and train strikes. And we'll be hearing from the real-life East Ender, hoping for a senior government job if Labour wins the next election. That's Wes Streeting, the MP for Ilford North, currently Shadow Health Secretary. So join me for The Late Debate here on ITV1 after news at 10.